Hello, thank you for being here once again. Welcome to all my new subscribers. Thank you all for joining me. I can't believe how many of you have been joining me. It's great. I'm loving it. And today I'm going to be talking about some of my spiritual beliefs and some of my beliefs around DMT and what it is and what it means. And just if there's any connection to DMT and the spiritual world. A lot of people think there is. Some people think there isn't. I've gotten a few comments regarding my beliefs about DMT. When I mention it in a video, I always get a few comments reacting to that, and some of them negatively, which is okay, but I think most of those people maybe are misunderstanding what I mean when I say the things I do, and maybe vice versa as well. I'm going to explain. This will all make sense in a minute. So in some of my videos where I discuss my beliefs surrounding DMT, I may have come off a little bit flippant or maybe even dismissive of the spiritual aspect of DMT. If I did come off that way, I didn't really mean to, but let me sort of explain what I think about DMT and what it means and all that, if anything. So some comment, not very many by the way, the vast majority of my comments are all positive, and I appreciate those very much. Thank you all for that positivity. So I don't mind the odd, critical comment. This one guy though was quite upset. He basically said, I forget exactly what I said, I'm going to be paraphrasing here, and I'm not trying to pick on this guy or anything, it's just, this is sort of a good talking point. So he basically said, how can you dismiss the fact that DMT is a gateway to another dimension or a connection to the spiritual world? I forget the exact phrasing he used, but he said something like that, like, how can you not believe that? And then he said something like, at this point, we all know it is, stopped acting like it isn't. And he seemed genuinely disappointed and upset with me. And then he went on and talked about something else, but I found that a very bizarre sort of point of view. First of all, I don't think very many people have that point of view. I think most people who do believe in the spiritual aspect of DMT sort of think it might be a thing, it might not, can go either way. But I guess a lot of people feel that in their mind, they're certain about it. So before I get into my beliefs, another thing that people seem to assume when I discuss my beliefs around DMT, like I got a couple comments that were predicated on the false assumption that I'm an atheist for some reason. I'm not sure why some people came to that conclusion. Like, just because I don't think DMT is a link to some other dimension or spiritual world doesn't mean I don't think DMT is a very spiritual experience or that I'm not a spiritual person. Like, spirituality exists largely outside of DMT and psychedelics. I think psychedelics are something that can help you get in tune with your spirituality. Like, there's two ways of looking at it. DMT is a spiritual experience, but I don't think it's an inherently spiritual thing. And I think maybe differences arise just because people look at the word spiritual different, or what that exactly means. Like, to me, if I see entities, if I think about higher powers and the meaning of life and the vastness of the universe and all that, like, to me, that's a spiritual experience, of course. Like, I don't believe entities exist. Like, when we see entities in a trip, I don't think it's a real entity. I think it's just a hallucination made by our brain. The thing is, I think spirituality comes from within. I think you discover it within yourself. Like, to me, a spiritual experience is when your mind is in a state where it's so loose and flowing that it can much easier grasp and reach spiritual concepts. And psychedelics put you in that state. Rather than DMT being an actual literal link, like in the physical world to another dimension or spiritual world, which might not be physical, could be like a mental plane or whatever. Like, I don't think DMT is that. Like, I don't think it connects you to a place where beings exist after your trip or before your trip. And maybe this is where I rub people the wrong way with this, and I don't mean to, but I'm being honest here. To me, that idea seems quite bizarre, and I'm not sure how people get to that belief, but I know a lot of you believe that. I personally just can't get there. Like, I don't see how that's more fathomable than the answer being hidden within nature's mysteries. Like, nature is working on a level that we have no clue about. It's doing all sorts of shit under the hood that I'm sure we're totally unaware of. Nature in itself is pretty much like an entity. I'm agnostic, by the way, if anyone's wondering. I just feel like anything we've come up with in terms of concepts around the nature of our existence, I think anything we've come up with is probably not even close to being right. And I don't think we can even get to the answer at our current level of intelligence. I feel like the answer is just way far beyond our comprehension. And I think the answer could be totally scientific based and it could be nothing after death. I haven't ruled that out for sure. At one point, I always believed that in the back of my head, and it was hard to get away from that. And then it was sort of like, maybe I don't believe in that. And then within the last few years, I firmly don't believe that that's the answer. It could be, but I lean against that pretty heavily now. And I believe that basically because if you think about the phrase, everything happens for a reason, I don't like that statement as a figure of speech, but as a literal fact, I love it. Like cause and effect, you know? It's true. Like I take this lighter and it drops. And the reason it dropped isn't so that I can now continue on my predestined path and fulfill my destiny, you know, fate. Basically, is what that phrase alludes to. But no, as a literal phrase, it's a much more valuable insight. Everything happens for a reason. It's not referring to some future destiny. It's referring to the past. Well, you can take it either way. But the way I interpret it is everything happens for a reason. Like the letter dropped because I opened my hand. It's that simple. And drop and open my hand or because I decided to, or whatever. There's a reason for it that happens beforehand, and everything is like that. Nothing just happens this is sort of a side tangent, but when everything was set in motion, however that happened, does maybe fate and predestination happen then because every molecule is just reacting to the one next to it, right? And if everything reacts in a way that you can accurately predict, then everything would play out the same way, right? But I think at very small scales, there's like some sort of randomness involved, like electrons move at random, in random directions or something like that. So maybe that, I don't know. Anyways, that wasn't a good tangent. Okay, so everything happens for a reason in the past. Hold that thought aside for just a second. And let's briefly consider the things that we can't answer as a human. Like what's beyond this universe, for example? What's beyond what we can see? Surely it can't be nothing. And if it's not nothing, then where does it end? Surely it can't go on forever. But if it can't go on forever, then there must be an end where reality ceases to exist. But there's many problems with that, obviously. How can nothing be beyond the wall or the border, the limit? And this limit would be in space. So can you put your arm through it? Or is it solid, like a big box, like a big aquarium? And maybe it is the answer, but who decides where the limit is? Or maybe it's just ever expanding. But then what's it expanding into? It can't expand into nothingness. And if it is all expanding, then okay, it was at a central point at one point, the Big Bang. What set that into motion or triggered it? Or why did all that energy concentrate into one central point at that time? Something had to set that in motion. You know, where did it all start? Chemical reactions just can't happen out of nowhere. And even just saying a God just made everything, that still doesn't really answer anything. The paradoxes still exist, like infinity and eternity. With all those questions that we can't answer, or even come close to even fathoming how to answer them. With that in mind, and then also what I was saying earlier, how everything happens for a reason, means there has to be an answer to those questions. It can't just be like, it is just because it is. There has to be a reason. And the reason I'm not an atheist is because if we can't even comprehend what those answers might be, then the answers must be something totally extraordinary. It wouldn't be something where if we discovered the answer, like if we were told the answer right now, it's not like we'd all be like, oh, why didn't we think of that? That makes sense. You know, we wouldn't be able to understand it. Or maybe it would instantly enlighten us and we'd instantly be smarter. I don't know. Who knows? It'd be something, I think, akin to the supernatural, like DMT entities or a spirit world or something on that magnitude of craziness, if we can't even comprehend it. And at that point, I mean, where do you draw the line between spiritual, natural, and scientific? maybe they're all one and the same. And what I was saying about nothingness and eternity, like opposites, I don't think nothingness seems likely. I think eternity seems more likely, and I don't know, because I can understand nothingness. I can understand that. I don't think the answer is that easy. Even then, that still doesn't make sense. But eternity is something that really confuses humans when we think about it. So I feel like the answer lies in there, the thing that we understand the least. So I can't really be atheist, because if eternity is a real concept and the universe has been here forever, I feel like no matter what happens after death, we will experience this universe again at one point. Because if eternity is a thing, then I also think that there's infinite possibilities that play out and have played out and have probably played out an infinite amount of times. And so I think every situation is inevitable. And so maybe when you die, who knows what happens? Maybe 1,000,000 years pass, and then somehow, some way, this consciousness is brought back into existence. Who knows how that would happen? How they would find my consciousness and do that, or who knows how it works. But if time is forever, then everything has to happen, So I think we're everything at the same time, because everything's playing out. Everything you can fathom is playing out right now. So who knows? Maybe we're all one spirit, and then our differences arise when we're filtered through our brain. That gives personality. Then when we die, we return to the same one state. And then we're sort of divided into different beings. Maybe the brain is like a tool that the spirit world uses to, put our spirit into existence. Who knows? Who knows? This is all speculation, obviously. It goes without saying. But as you can see, I'm not an atheist, or I'm not a non-spiritual person. Quite the opposite, actually. I'm very spiritual, and I think about this stuff every day, pretty much. But I don't think DMT has anything to do with spirituality. Like, I don't think it's like an inherently spiritual molecule that's been chosen by the spirit world to be some sort of communication device between us. That just seems like a novel, like a science fiction novel to me. I think DMT, like other psychedelics, it puts you in a state where you're very conducive to spiritual ideas and thoughts, and it's ideal for that. It lets your brain connect in different ways that it normally doesn't. It lets you dig into your subconscious and really sort through, ideas that you already hold. You never come out of a DMT trip with new information. It's always something building off what you already knew. You come to your own conclusions, rather than, or some people have the idea that when you smoke DMT, actual entities come to you and you speak with actual entities who are giving you information that you previously didn't have. I don't think that's true. And that's all. And maybe science one day will lead us to the answers that we're looking for. But at that point, I imagine we'd be so intelligent and so different. We'd be like gods by then, basically, anyways, So that's why I was saying earlier, maybe spirituality and science are one and the same. And maybe my idea that nature can explain certain things about DMT is the same thing as saying it's a spiritual answer. So I don't know what I believe. I'm not saying that entities don't come to us for sure either, I think it's kind of a far-fetched idea, but again, I think all of our theories are pretty much far-fetched because we can't understand the things that I think are core to the answer, like ideas about time and eternity and all that. It's hard to explain this stuff in a way that makes sense to everybody. Everyone has different ideas of what all this stuff means, and some people blur the line between like science, nature, and spirituality, reality, thoughts, mentality, all that stuff. It all sort of blends together. And some people, interchange them sometimes. So It's hard to really express exactly what I mean so that everyone's gonna, get what I say, but I hope I got across to some people. Like a lot of stuff, I think most of us are all on the same page. I think it's just looking at it differently, but in our minds, I think it's the same. Maybe not, maybe we're very different, who knows? So yeah, DMT can open us to spirituality, but I don't think it's an integral part of spirituality. Or if it is, then I think all psychedelics are, or just drugs are in general. I've thought about very spiritual things on chemical drugs before too. I just think psychedelics are better for it. But I think my ideas around DMT are mostly rooted in science and nature. I think there's a scientific and natural explanation for everything we encounter on DMT. And one very confusing thing, for example, is how people seem to see the same hallucinations without any external input, getting flipped off by like a jester or like a Buddha head or some sort of entity. That's something common that happens. I experienced that. I never heard of that before. Then when I posted that video, people were telling me like, Joe Rogan said the same thing. And then other people were commenting they saw the same thing. So that's real. That happens. I can't explain it, but that doesn't mean it's automatically a supernatural thing. I think nature is so crazy and does so much amazing shit that the idea that it's somehow doing that as well isn't that far-fetched to me. So DMT probably has changed my thoughts on spirituality and probably bolstered it in some way. But that doesn't, and so yeah, it is a spiritual drug, but I don't think it's a link to the spiritual world or anything like that. And but yeah, I think experiencing entities and thinking about that stuff and getting in touch with spirituality inside your head is spirituality. That's being spiritual. It doesn't have to be some supernatural answer. I think, the shit that goes on in our head and in our own world in reality is totally bizarre and weird, and we're just completely used to it. Probably, like, the shit that's happening here is probably just as arbitrary as the shit that happens on a DMT trip. But DMT is an extremely fun and interesting way of presenting spiritual ideas to you. So that's why I like it. It's fun, and it really lets you delve into your spiritual side. Some may think that the hallucinations we see are just too bizarre and out there and too real and too intense and crazy to be generated by our brains. But if we can dream, I've had very vivid dreams that were probably wilder than a DMT trip, You're just less like lucid, like less conscious, so you don't really remember much. But the dreams I have remembered a lot, they were just totally crazy. And you believe it 100%. That's your reality. So I think your brain can do a lot more than it shows us, obviously. But I think it's a lot more than even people probably realize. DMT to me is a testament of how crazy nature can be and how little we understand nature and how little we understand the true potential and power of our brains. That's all. And I hope that was interesting, or you got something out of that anyways. I feel like we've been getting to know each other better recently in the live streams. Thank you guys for showing up for that. That's so great. Like, I hate going out. I'm lazy. But that doesn't mean I don't like socializing or I don't get lonely. So it's like an easy way to socialize without going out, It's great. Thank you guys for showing up. I'm going to be doing a lot more streams in the future, and yeah, still lots of plans coming. Still lots of plans. All right. I love you guys. Thank you. Have a good night, day, morning, afternoon, dawn, dusk, twilight, whatever it is. Who fucking cares? It doesn't really matter. I just hope that it's good and fantastic and awesome. Okay. Goodbye.